Shalom Chavrim, welcome to lesson 29 of Learn Biblical Hebrew. This is the second of 3 consecutive lessons that are looking at verses from Genesis chapter 1. In lesson 28, we looked at Genesis chapter 1 verse 3. This lesson we're going to look at verse 4, and in lesson 30 we'll look at verse 5. So here it is, Genesis chapter 1 verse 4. Vayara Elohim et Haor ki tov. Vayabedel Elohim ben Haor u ben Hachosyak. So there's several new words here. Let's look first at the letter by letter translation. It's getting into a bit of a mess with trying to fit in all these words. As I've said, I think it's good to wean yourself off this and just become familiar with the Hebrew letters and just work straight off them. So here's our word-by-word translation, again working from right to left. And sees God, et standing for the object, haor, the light, ki tov, that, good. So we met ki before, meaning for or because. Here it has another meaning, that. Ki tov, that it was good. Why yabedel, and divides God between the light and between the dark. Notice how the word between is repeated in Hebrew idiom. We would just say between the light and the dark, but in Hebrew you have to say between the light and between the dark. Another interesting feature here, notice the similarities in sound between this word meaning see and this word meaning light. This letter called Aleph has an sound, but at the end of a word it's often kind of elided or omitted. Probably in the days of Moses it was sounded more, but coming down to the time of Jesus, its sound was partly being lost, particularly at the end of words, not so much at the beginning of words. In sister languages like Arabic, it still has a strong sound. But there is an interesting similarity with these letters between this word and this word, saw, the light, which perhaps is partly behind the logic of bringing in this particular word here. God saw the light. We should notice that in Hebrew we often have the word saw, and it's just introducing a reaction. It doesn't imply that God had to carry out an inspection before he knew about it. God saw the light. So in the translation, I think I actually said God was pleased with the light. That's another way of putting it, rather than the more literal God saw the light, because that has the implication in English that he had to have a look, he had to make an inspection, but that's not actually what the Hebrew word is saying. Another interesting feature here is the way that the word God is repeated in these first few verses of Genesis. God saw the light, that it was good, and God divided. In normal English, as in many other languages, we wouldn't repeat the word God, we would just say he. And it can be confusing sometimes in some languages when you keep repeating the noun because of the normal convention of just saying the noun first, and then after that you just say he. But perhaps it carries over into English, and its function, I mean, it's the same in Hebrew anyway, but the function of perhaps repeating it is that it makes this all a little bit weightier and perhaps puts a real focus on God and his creative work. Another interesting point is that the light is actually called good and the darkness isn't. In fact, it's clearly implied that the darkness isn't good, as it's now separated out from the light. So this is a new word we have here. Badal, meaning separated. God separated out, we could say separated out the light from the darkness. Choshek, darkness. As I mentioned in lesson 28, with light, it's not just a physical thing he's talking about. He's talking about light as representing, symbolizing, and even embodying the goodness of God's creation. Although the physical thing is not to be excluded, as we'll see in the next verse, verse 4, we start to talk about the formation of day and night. Another interesting point, Genesis doesn't say that God created darkness. He created the light, but it doesn't say he created the darkness. It's an interesting verse to look at. Isaiah 45 verse 7, which is an uncompromising, extreme statement of God's sovereignty and control, says that God forms the light and creates darkness, makes peace and creates evil or calamity. So that's an extreme statement of God's sovereignty and control. Genesis is a bit more cautious, ascribing only the good creation to God. Both statements are true on the level that they're talking. So again, as we return to this verse, we notice how magnificent it is, how brief, and the nice literary structure of it. Again, which is partly lost in translation, so that's why we're here learning it in Hebrew. Vayara Elohim es haor ki tov. Vayabdel Elohim ben haor uben hachoshek.